This morning we have a very wonderful speaker and who was involved in our conference 5 years ago. 5 years ago, RSF Social Finance was a partner with Praxis Peace Institute in putting on the Economics of Peace Conference in Sonoma. And this year they're a co-sponsor, and we appreciate that too. So Don Shaffer has served as president and CEO of RSF Social Finance since 2007. As leaders in social finance, Don with the team at RSF seek to transform the way the world works with money. Their constant question is, how can we model financial transactions that are direct, transparent, personal, and based on long-term relationships? Don has been a social entrepreneur for many years, growing a for-profit education business, a software company, a sporting goods manufacturing company, in addition to a nonprofit and the Business Alliance for Local Living Economies, BALE. Please welcome Don Shaffer.
Hello all. How's everyone doing this morning? Good. Hopefully we can kick this off with some interesting dialogue, and I hope that we have some time for a little bit of interactive questions or comments based on some things that I'm going to be talking about. So I want to thank Georgia for inviting me, and you could say that maybe I was predisposed to being connected to the Praxis Peace Institute because all my ancestors are Quaker farmers and small business people from the Philadelphia area. And I grew up with a lot of those values. In fact, I just learned relatively recently that one of my ancestors in the 1670s and 80s in England was arrested several times for worshiping in his own house. So that was apparently not allowed. If you had to be part of the Church of England and show up and do your thing in the church, or else you'd be arrested. He spent 19 months in jail at one point for this, and was arrested repeatedly for it. Obviously, the incarceration wasn't working as a way of him acting on his strongly held values, and so. So I think I've got the activist gene in the DNA somewhere, and I try and bring that to my work and our work at RSF every day. And so further, I was thinking about speaking this morning, and some of you know this, but my first job in this lifetime, my first real job was carrying golf bags for Wall Street traders and bankers in New Jersey, where I grew up. And I was 14 years old, and I had a kind of a jarring and confusing experience where my father, who was in the textiles business, sheets and towels, those were things that I used every day and were pretty easy to understand. I would ask all these Wall Street guys, what they did. And this was in the mid-'80s, just at the start of the derivatives and leveraged buyouts and all the sophisticated financial instruments were starting to be created at that time. And none of them could explain it to me very easily. They almost always paused as if to say, what am I going to tell this 14-year-old kid about what I do? And yet it was abundantly clear to me that these were the people that had a lot of the wealth and power in society, and that was confusing to me as a 14-year-old kid, and I think really has informed my journey in a significant way, because I've basically been obsessed since then with how does the financial system work and who is the financial system for, and so I'm really glad to be here at this conference where that's part of the questioning, I think, that we're all doing here, and so I don't know if we've got slides, but actually it doesn't matter, because I was going to announce to you that I pitched out the idea of going through my slides this morning because I wanted to cover things in a little different way based on some conversations I had last night, and I think, for me, PowerPoint, I have a awkward relationship with PowerPoint presentations anyway. So I'm just going to speak, so I hope that's okay, and hope we have some time. So the topic I'm going to speak about is remaking the food system, and in particular an integrated approach to using different kinds of capital that we do at RSF that we're hoping lots of other people can do as well, and in fact many people are starting to approach things this way. So I'll start out first by saying that how many people are familiar with RSF social finance? Okay, great. So quite a few people are. RSF stands for Rudolf Steiner Foundation. So in 1984, when we started, there were a group of people visionary people who were inspired by the work of Rudolf Steiner. And in particular, there were a series of lectures that Rudolf Steiner did in 1922 on the subject of economics and money. And basically, he was saying in 1922, if we continue to go down the path that we seem to be on at that time, people will become more and more abstract from each other in financial transactions. And he basically said, to the extent that we can that all the parties in a financial transaction can be visible to each other, that is a healthy situation. And to the extent where everyone is abstracted and disconnected from one another, that's going to lead to difficulties. And so that's basically the premise, as Georgia, read, that's the lens through which we see things. And in terms of the food system, thankfully, more and more people are wanting to connect their money more directly with things that they feel are doing good in the world. Whether in terms of investing, we're seeing a lot of shifts in terms of where people bank, what they invest in, et cetera, and it's really, really encouraging. And likewise, in the food system, what we're seeing is a lot of momentum around healthy, diversified local food systems. 10, 15 years ago, when a number of people were working on this, or Martin Ping was working on this, 40 years ago, at the team at Hawthorne Valley, and David Corton, I see here others working on this for a long time around the importance of local economies, and it just happened that food has now, I think, been the first sector of our economy where it's now gone mainstream, where literally millions, tens of millions of people are wanting to connect with where their food comes from, and ideally, if they can get as much of it as possible from a 100-mile radius of where they live, that would be ideal. And so that's something that we share at RSF. So I would say local food systems is a theme I'm going to talk a little bit about. The other one is what I would say is what's beyond organic. And so in our world, biodynamic is beyond organic. And so for those of you who aren't familiar, Rudolf Steiner did a series of lectures in 1924, 2 years after the economics lectures, on the subject of what became known as biodynamic agriculture and biodynamics. And so this is, the way to think about it in shorthand is, if organic is doing less bad to the soil, if it's putting less pesticides and less herbicides and so forth into the soil, then biodynamics is a methodology where you're actively building soil fertility, and you're focused on the whole farm as a living organism, in a way that today's monocropping, worst in the conventional corn and soybeans industry, but then even organic can be done in a monocrop way, whereas with biodynamics you really have to look at the whole farm as a living organism. And so I'm not going to go into that at length, but just know, I would urge you to explore biodynamics if you don't know about it. It's not the only, there are all kinds of kind of advanced composting methodologies and things that are emerging now to build soil fertility, but certainly biodynamics is one of one of the ways that's the most well-established, studied, practiced, and you may taste it in some wine tonight, for example. I think the wine industry is the farthest along in adopting biodynamics because they found that it improves the taste. So I think it's every 2 years, might be every 5 years. There's an exchange between French and California winemakers, and they go back and forth, and it's basically a contest to see who has the best tasting wine that year. And what was found the last time they did this, there isn't a lot of marketing that's done around biodynamics by the wineries, but it was found that of the 20 best tasting wines that were reviewed by this panel of world experts, 16 of them were actively using biodynamic practices in how they manage their farms and their soil. So local and biodynamic are kind of the headlines here, and I want to get into the capital part of the equation, because is how we work with money relative to remaking the food system is the subject I hope we can spend the most time on right now. So one of the frameworks that we're working with right now that I was just reflecting on last night and this morning is we're looking at, think of it as we're looking at RSF, the land itself, and then you've got farm livelihoods, and then you've got basically the processing and the distribution of food. There are things like the organic food industry, where things that you find on aisle 7 at Whole Foods, branded products. That has now become mainstream. So we used to, over the last 10, 15 years, we've made a lot of loans at RSF to the organic food industry, and now we've decided, in our history, we've made a lot of decisions to do what's hard on purpose. And so this is one of those moments where we're now putting more emphasis on making loans available to those who are doing food processing and distribution, kind of the middle part of the value chain, towards healthy, diversified regional food systems based on beyond organic agriculture. That's our current MO. But I want to give 3 examples of work that we're doing in each of these categories: the land, farm livelihoods, and then the processing and distribution of food as examples, so you can see how we work. And then I'd love to have a little bit of conversation to see if it sparks anything for you all. So we have a supporting organization at RSF that we don't talk a lot about. John Bloom is here from RSF, who's been spearheading our efforts for a long time in this area. This supporting organization is called the Yggdrasil Land Foundation. So Yggdrasil is a Welsh name. It's not easy to Google, so I'll spell it for you. It's YGG, John, correct me if I'm wrong, YGGDRASIL. So if you Google Yggdrasil Land Foundation, you'll find a website that describes what we've been doing for a long time, which is trying to preserve biodynamic ag land in perpetuity. So this is through a combination of easements, land donations, other work. I'm not going to go into a lot of the detail of exactly how we've done this, but you can learn some about it on the site. We're very interested to see, is there a way to preserve more biodynamic land so that it stays in production in perpetuity and it doesn't have to succumb to the forces of real estate development and other things. And so there's a farm up in Mendocino County just north of here called Filigreen Farm. Is anyone familiar with Filigreen Farm? Okay, wonderful. This is a 90-acre biodynamic farm that has about 60 varietals of apples. They're growing Pinot Noir grapes, blueberries, olives for olive oil, and it has just a seemingly miraculous abundance of other things that are grown on the land. And Christopher Tebbett, who's the farm manager there, is a water. I describe him as a water geek. He's gone very deeply into the structural components of water and how that fits in the biodynamic system. And so this is one of the farms that has been donated and now will remain in biodynamic production for forever. Whatever forever means. So So that's one activity that we do. There are about 600 acres of land, mainly in California, Wisconsin, and New Hampshire, that have been that are part of the Yggdrasil Land Foundation. And so I was talking with a couple of people last night about it. And so I want to mention that preserving land is important. The second area is around farm livelihoods. And so we have, this gets into sort of the integrated capital nature of what we do at RSF, because we do a lot of lending, but then we also do really interesting things with philanthropic dollars, helping donors do investing, making loan guarantees and other things that are not just grants with their philanthropic dollars. And so there's an organization called Viva Farms, which is based in the Skagit Valley up in northwest Washington state, that we've been tracking for quite a while. They have a farm incubator program, essentially, where they're working with mainly immigrant farm workers and young farmers to help them get to the stage where they can actually buy a farm and be farm owners. And they have a very advanced program in how they go about doing this. They also have a CSA and a farm stand and distribution, and they have a very robust kind of earned income model of how they support this. But this is an unusual organization that wasn't just going to like trot down to the local bank and fill out an application and get a loan to expand. And that's where we come in. We have done, over the last 30 years, we've made like $300 million in loans, mainly to organizations, hundreds of organizations that weren't yet ready for a commercial bank. And so Viva Farms, we were able to make an initial loan to them, but it was coupled with a partial guarantee that came from one of our philanthropic funds at RSF. Otherwise, it would have been too hard for us to be comfortable with the risk equation. And we have a 30-year track record, 100% repayment rate to our loan fund investors. We have 1,600 investors in our loan funds, and we want to continue that. And so this partial guarantee from a donor allowed us to get comfortable making the loan. And not only that, but we've also collaborated with several private foundations and one community foundation in the area, and now actually basically an angel investor group that's based in Seattle to help them expand another part of their business over the past several months. So Viva Farms is an example where they are doing this farm incubator program as kind of the heart of the work that they're doing, and they have needs for growth capital, not just grants, but productive loans, and they have earned income and an ability to pay back these loans. But they're kind of an unusual hybrid social enterprise that's difficult for the mainstream banking and investing world to understand. And so I think of RSF somewhat as a translator to help the investors and donors find and make productive contributions to an organization like Viva Farms, and then help Viva Farms grow to the point where they can then be more easily understood by the mainstream capital system, to the extent that they want to be part of the mainstream capital system. That's a whole nother topic. We have some organizations that we call kind of grow and graduate, or we kind of bless and release them as they get bigger, and others that want to stay associated with RSF because they want to know what the intentions are of the investors and donors, as opposed to when you get a loan, especially from a big bank, you have no idea where the money is coming from. So that's a whole other subject as well. I'm trying to focus on remaking the food system and the fact that I think it's going to require for a while this kind of integrated capital approach to try and meet the needs of organizations like Viva Farms. So the example I'd like to talk about in the third category, so we've had farmland, farm livelihoods. The third category is food distribution and processing. So there's an organization called Common Market in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, that is a local organic food distributor. They work with about 70 family farms in the Delaware Valley around Philadelphia, and they distribute their food to hospitals and schools in inner city Philadelphia, mainly in North Philly, where the kids or the patients at the hospital typically have not had access to healthy, nutritious, organic, local food. And so they have cracked the nut on how to do this, and yet it's not an easy business. It's a low margin, very difficult business, as some people who are in this business can attest. And so they too needed a different lens on how to think about their capital. And so in this case, too, we were able to make a $130,000 line of credit available to them to help bridge, because it was taking them 60 to 100 days to get paid, by the hospitals and schools. And this is a classic need that businesses have, is to bridge that. And so we made a $130,000 line of credit available to them to bridge that. That has now grown to over $400,000, over a period of a few years, in terms of just what they need in order to grow the business. And then they were outgrowing their space, and so they needed a bigger space to work in, and they calculated how much they were paying in rent, and they said, well, let's try and stretch to actually own a building. And they looked in North Philly, which is a tough neighborhood, and said, why don't we do our operations right from a central location in North Philly? And so they identified a building, and 73,000 square foot building, and they said, we'd like to acquire this building, but we really need help with the financing. And so we were, long story short, able to make a loan to them of just shy of $1 million. But we were able to put together, again, some partial loan guarantees from ourselves, from one of our philanthropic funds, and then also from the Clinial Foundation, the Kellogg Foundation, the 11th Hour Project. We were able to put together a number of other guarantees that would help us, again, get comfortable with the risk equation. And so I'm hitting loan guarantees on purpose because I feel like it's a very underutilized way of going about providing capital to these kinds of projects. And I think that, knock on wood, I think the likelihood of us having to access those guarantees is very small in Common Market's case or in Viva Farms' case. But it's really essential for us to get that in there to help us feel comfortable with it. And we've been able to also facilitate a couple of rounds of grants to the nonprofit part of what Common Market is doing, including enabling other small local organic food distributors from around the country to come and learn from what Common Market is doing. So while I was there on a site visit, visiting with Hailey Johnston, who's the head of Common Market, while I was there, in the short time I was there, he got a call from Omaha, Nebraska, and another call from Jacksonville, Florida, from people saying, we want to do what you guys are doing. How do we do it? And so we were able to facilitate, I think 12 or 15 of those kinds of people to come to Common Market and learn from what they were doing. And this is another principle we believe in, which is around replication, place-based replication, as opposed to scaling of gigantic centralized organizations. And we see ourselves that way at RSF, where we are now working with community foundations to open source what we're doing, because we feel like if there are 100 or 200 community foundations in the next 10 years that we're doing direct loan funds and loan guarantee funds and these kinds of things, which they can do, that would be better than us trying to become the Goldman Sachs of social finance. So it gives you a little window into that approach. But so those are, I just wanted to give you some examples of what I feel like there's a lot of momentum right now in the food sector, for change. There's lots of demand that's driving the move towards local and even starting towards biodynamic and similar methodologies. But it's going to take a little different approach to working with money to get us there. And there are lots of other organizations I could mention, like Slow Money, or new crowdfunding sites like Kiva Zip, or community sourced that are, I'd urge you to go to Kiva Zip and community sourced with a D at the end. These are crowdfunding sites that help early stage entrepreneurs who need between $2,000 and $50,000 to get going. And so I won't go more into that, but that's a very encouraging trend I urge you to check out. So those are a few examples, and I'm kind of banking on literally this, you all, to be in the vanguard, kind of the leading edge of pushing both for the food system that we all want, and then a different way of working with money, which is going to be required to get us there. So thanks, and I hope there's some questions or comments. Thanks very much. It's good to be here. So Secrets of the Soil is a book and a movie that includes, I guess, some prominent place related to biodynamics in there. Yeah. Yeah. Other questions, comments? Yes, sir? Yeah, so the question was, is there a credit union component to RSF that's envisioned? That's a great question, and that came up prominently about 15, 20 years ago at RSF. Which led to a series of conversations where we essentially spawned a commercial bank that now exists here in San Francisco called New Resource Bank, and the chair of our board at RSF is also the chair, Mark Finzer is also the chair of the board of New Resource Bank, and that was just what happened to come out of all that discussion. It very well could have been a credit union. So the short answer is no. There isn't a credit union envisioned per se at RSF, and in a sense, we want to keep going with the way we're doing it, where we have 1,600 investors, all of whom are individuals or families, and you can invest in this loan fund with $1,000 minimum, and matching those up with borrowers in the way that we currently do it today. It seems to work for us, so we're going to stick with the form that we have for now, but that's a good question. Yes, back there. The short answer is yes. Well, I don't know of any organization that supports as many initiatives related to local currencies, alternative currencies, interest-free lending. I mean, right now we're promoting the heck out of Kiva Zip and Community Source because they're doing interest-free loans. A pollinator project here in Oakland is also doing interest-free loans, and we're trying to surface and support directly, with money, these initiatives so that they can become more established. So I'm with you 1,000% that it will be great because it does seem like there's more momentum moving towards those things right now, and we would like to do more interest-free loans with philanthropic dollars that we have at RSF, and get used to it that way. But it's a great topic, and I'd love to do at least the 2-hour version at some point. A 19-hour version could come after that. But that's a great question. That's about as short as I can answer on it right now. And then on no-till, yeah, I mean, we're not just standing up for biodynamics. We want to see anything that is being worked on in a serious way that's beyond organic, and no-till would fall into that. So yes. So George has given me the hook, the time out. So thanks everybody, and look forward to hearing from Nikki and others. Yeah. All right.